Welcome back to another episode of My Legacy Garage. Today, we're going to go through everything a homeowner needs to know about the gas system in their house. It's not going to be technical, we're not going to get into how to fix stuff, but just the basic things that a homeowner should know so that they can be properly educated about how the gas system in their house works and what things that they should be able to answer questions about if they have to call their fuel supplier or something along those lines. So let's start with where the gas comes in the house. If your home uses propane, you've got tanks at your house somewhere. Now they may not even be on your property if you're in a community with a community system, but somewhere there's a tank. If it's natural gas, it's all underground, sort of like city water. Works the same way. Propane is what I use. That's what a lot of people use out in the country. Big cities, even relatively small cities, have natural gas supply, and that's what they use. Now, propane typically just has the tanks up beside the house or maybe out in the yard and has a line running to the house to a regulator, but that's the norm for them. Occasionally, if it's a community system, there will be a meter attached to the side of your house, just like if you were on a natural gas system. There's a meter attached to your house, and that's where the gas comes in. Now, if you've got tanks, let's go over a couple of quick things you should know about them real quick. If you open the lid on the tank, you're going to see some stuff that looks like this. Now, this red thing right here, that's a regulator. This right here, this is a gauge to see how much gas is in the tank. And then this right here, this is how you shut it off. It works just like a hose spigot on the outside of the house. Clockwise shuts it off, counterclockwise turns it on. Only shut this off in an emergency. Don't shut it off because you're leaving town and you're going to turn it on when you come back. It's actually illegal. You only need to shut this off in an emergency. Now the gauge, that is something that you should know a little bit about. This one, of course, is hard to see because it's all backwards, but it goes all the way up to 80% right here, which is as full as you fill a propane tank. You have to leave room for expansion. So if they come and they fill your tanks and you go out and look and it's at 80 and you're like, well, they didn't really fill it. They did. Really, they did. Okay? Next thing we need to look at. This right here. This is a pressure relief valve. This, in case of the tank overpressurizing, pops and the gas comes out right there, which is why there are codes on where these tanks can be set. You can't just put them all willy-nilly wherever you want. So you're going to have to ask your fuel supplier before you pick a place. Don't set your heart on something and then go, oh wait, you mean I can't do that? It can't be right beside the air conditioning unit that could cause a fire? No, it really can't. And then, on the regulator, it's hard to see, but right at my thumb right here, there is a vent. And that is just open to the atmosphere and allows air to move in and out of there. And in an emergency, if the regulator were to fail or overpressurize, gas will come out there as well. Again, there are codes on that about where they can be located and all that stuff. Now let's talk a little bit about where the gas goes into the building. You can see here we have another regulator. This is where it penetrates the foundation wall of the house. You'll notice that this is a black iron pipe right here, not copper like the rest of this line is. And the reason for that is because if you run copper through any sort of masonry, whether it be brick, block, mortar joints, whatever it might be, even slabs of concrete, the acidity in that will eat up copper, so it needs to be sleeved in plastic. So a lot of people just choose to run iron through the wall because it doesn't react like that. I have gone ahead and moved this into the shop here because in the crawl space you can't really see where the gas line comes into the house and the little manifold and everything there. And you can really see it well here in the garage, and you can also see a little bit of the code stuff I'm going to talk about, so it's a lot easier in here. Let's take a look. Here we can see where the gas line comes in from outside and into this manifold assembly right here. Now there's only two things in here that can run on gas. This line right here goes up to the hanging unit heater. This down here is just capped off in case I wanted to hook something up to it to work on it, like a fireplace or a little heater or something along those lines. So that's the basic idea of a manifold. It comes in, has a couple of T's, and goes to where it needs to go. That's how most gas systems are constructed these days. Now here we can see the copper goes into that T, and then it has a pipe nipple with a cap on the bottom of it. That is called a sediment trap or a drip leg. And those are required for any unattended heat source except for fire logs. Those are considered decorative and you don't need those. But your water heater, heat sources, things like that, they need to have this. It also needs to have a shutoff within 5 accessible feet. So the good news is this shutoff is literally right there. So I didn't have to put one right there. But you do have to have a shutoff valve, even behind your range. I know it seems kind of silly, but that's the way it is. And it's something you should be aware of in case you don't have one so you can get it fixed. Something else to keep in mind, exhaust. It comes out of your house somewhere, depending on what's on your system. So my exhaust for my furnace comes out right there. It's that PVC pipe. Easy peasy, draws its fresh air for combustion from the crawl space. Sometimes you'll have 2 pipes coming out, one for air intake, one for exhaust. Now, if it's really cold out, you'll see some water vapor coming out of this thing if it's burning. So that's an easy way to be able to tell if your furnace is burning without having to go in your crawl space. Something that you should definitely know. Know what in your house uses propane? I couldn't tell you how many times I've had a customer call on the phone or I've gone to their house and asked them what's on the system, and they have no idea. Not a clue what in their house uses gas. It's crazy. So when you buy the house, do yourself a favor, do a little bit of research, find out what uses gas that you can't really see. I mean, you might have a fireplace or maybe a little wall heater or something, or maybe a range to cook with, and that'll be very obviously gas. But what about your water heater? What about your furnace? And is your furnace a heat pump or just a straight gas furnace? Those are important, especially when it comes to the automatic delivery for the fuel company. If you tell them it's a heat pump and they set you up like that, you're going to run out of gas because they're not going to know you need gas, because as far as they're concerned, unless it's below like 40 degrees, you're not going to be burning gas. So, all very important things to know. Take the time, figure it out. It's not that hard. Make a list somewhere if you have to so that you can look it up later if anything ever happens. Or if, God forbid, you do run out of gas and you have to call your gas company. It's good information. Let's take a second and talk about maintenance. So most gas systems don't require a lot of maintenance, and what is required the gas company typically takes care of unless you own the tank, which is a whole separate ball of wax that we're not going to dive into. But some things that you do need to remember: if the gas company owns the tanks, then the tanks and the regulator they'll take care of in most cases. However, if something happens inside the house or to the lines between the tank and the house or along those lines, that is your responsibility. So it's important to know, as far as maintenance is concerned, what in your house runs on propane, which we already talked about, gas of any sort, and secondly, does it have a pilot or electronic ignition? Things with pilot ignition tend to require more maintenance than things with electronic ignitions. For example, a modern furnace is going to have electronic ignition, but some of the older units, they don't. They have a pilot. And dirt, bugs, cobwebs from spiders, mud daubers, all big-time enemies of gas equipment. They get into it, they build nests in the pilots. It's just a teeny tiny little pinhole that the gas comes through. It doesn't take much for it to get stopped up. My recommendation, let your pilots burn year-round. That keeps the bugs and everything out of them. And it only burns about a gallon of gas every 28 days or so. So you're not talking about a massive amount of gas here in order to keep the pilots cleaned and avoid a service call. Now, electronic ignition is more complicated. If it doesn't work, you need a technician to come take a look at it. Unless you want to look at some of my other videos and try and tackle it yourself, which I recommend as long as you're comfortable. Don't get in over your head. Sometimes they require maintenance, you say. How often, you ask? Depends on a lot of different factors. Do you have pets? That pet hair and dander just loves to get sucked up inside those air shutters on the pilots and stuff and clog them right up. Basically, unless you're having a problem with it, I'd let it ride. If you have a set of fire logs, you can get them cleaned once a year, especially if they're vent-free. They don't have a glass front and dust and stuff can regularly get in there. If it's a vented unit, and they call them a direct vent, where it has two pipes that go out and brings fresh air in, and the exhaust goes out. It's got a glass front and sealed. It's on the front and it's sealed from the house. That, honestly, unless you're having a problem with it, let it ride. Or, if you want to get it cleaned and spruced up a little bit, that's fine too. Let's talk a little bit about safety. So the first thing that I can tell you is important is don't try and lock the lid to the tank so it doesn't open. Number one, it's illegal. The fire department needs access to that if they ever need to. And secondly, nobody's going to steal the gas. It takes specialized equipment, thousands of dollars of equipment, and a lot of time and effort of several people to empty one of those tanks out. It can't just be stolen. Okay? Secondly, keep access to your tank open so that your fuel supplier can get to it without having to go around all sorts of stuff in the yard and cars and stuff like that. It's hard to drag that hose 100 feet back to put gas in and make sure it doesn't rub against any sort of cars or maybe knock over planters and stuff like that. Keep that in mind when you're setting your yard up. Third, don't use Joe Blow from down the street to work on your gas system. Gas is safe as long as you follow the rules. And Joe Blow from down the street may not even know what the rules are, let alone care if he follows them or not. Use a fuel supplier or somebody who's licensed that has, a little skin in the game to make sure they do it right instead of just however they feel like doing it. I have seen some crazy stuff, including garden hose run across the kitchen floor to run a heater and just hose clamp to a gas line on each side. It's insane. That sort of leads into number 4. Don't modify the gas system yourself. Have a professional do it. It's not worth the risk. It really isn't. And the last thing I want to say is, if you smell gas, don't overreact. React appropriately. If you have an overwhelming smell of gas in the house, don't turn any lights on, don't make any phone calls, simply leave the house, call the fire department. It's the best thing to do. They have big fans, they'll come in and blow it out and shut the gas off and all that stuff. If you feel safe and comfortable to do so, you can shut the gas off outside the tanks like we talked about earlier. Get it leak checked. They have special equipment that checks for leaks. And there's codes on when they have to do it. Anytime the system's interrupted for any reason, which, by the way, is why you can't just shut the tank off, turn it back on again, because technically that's an interruption of service, and code requires it be leak checked by somebody with a gas license. So, when in doubt, get it checked. It's the safe thing to do. I'll about wrap it up for this video. I hope you all found it interesting and informative. And if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the comment box. I read every one, and I respond to every one as long as I can. So don't be afraid to ask a question. I appreciate your time for watching the video. Please hit the subscribe button, and I'd really appreciate that as well. Thanks for watching another episode of My Legacy Garage. We'll see you next time.